Good evening. Welcome to the June 19th, 2017 meeting of the Pacifica Planning Commission. And we'll start with a roll call.
Commissioner Behringer?
Present.
Commissioner Cooper?
Here.
Chair Niblin?
Here.
Commissioner Clifford?
Present.
And Commissioner Campbell and Commissioner Gordon are both absent.
Thank you. I guess that will move us then to the salute to the flag. I'll ask that Commissioner Behringer lead us in the salute to the flag tonight.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Behringer. So we'll move then to administrative business, and I guess the first item of administrative business would be the approval of order of agenda. Is there a motion for to approve the order of agenda? Commissioner Clifford.
I move that we approve the order of agenda.
Commissioner Cooper?
I'll second the motion.
All right, why don't we go ahead and vote? Okay, that is unanimous on a 4-0 vote. Thank you. So we've got minutes now, and with the couple of commissioners we have absent, I guess we should take a look at this and determine whether or not we've got the...
So it doesn't look like we do have a requisite number to approve both sets. We can bring those back to you.
Okay, that's what we'll do. Thank you so much. We'll go ahead and continue those to a future meeting. So the next item on the agenda then is the designation of a liaison to the City Council meeting of June 26, 2017. I guess this is with respect to the consideration by the City Council of the marijuana ordinance.
Yes. So typically we ask you to come up for appeals, but this is a little different. And the Planning Commission spent so much time and gave it a lot of careful thought. I think it would be very helpful to the process to have a representative there with staff to represent the commission.
All right, well, thank you so much. Any of my colleagues here available and perhaps willing to step into the breach on this matter?
I won't be around.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm a little concerned about my own availability.
Okay, I'll do it.
There you have it. Commissioner Clifford, once again.
Twisted my arm.
Fantastic. Thank you again for agreeing to do that. I think you're right. A lot of consideration went into this, and I think having the sort of perspective of one of the commissioners to articulate where we went would be really helpful. Thank you. So that moves us then to oral communications, and this is the portion of the agenda that is available to the public to address the Planning Commission on any issues within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission that is not on the agenda. The time allowed for any speaker will be 3 minutes. I don't have any speaker cards for this portion of the agenda. Is there anybody who wants to speak to oral communication? And I'm not seeing anybody that does, so we're going to go ahead then and move along then to the next item on the agenda. I'll just note that we don't have any consent items, which is then going to take us to continued public hearings. The first item under continued public hearings is use permit UP 96506 and specific plan SP 16217, filed by Tracy Lum on behalf of T-Mobile for relocation of 6 pole-mounted panel antennas from an existing freestanding sign and installation of 3 additional pole-mounted panel antennas within an alternate freestanding sign, and installation of rooftop equipment in 2 areas, each measuring 16 feet 10 inches in length by 10 feet 6 inches in width by 8 feet 8 inches in height atop an existing shopping center building at 709 Hickey Boulevard, assessor parcel number 009440120. The recommended action on the part of staff is that we approve this item as conditioned, and go ahead then and ask staff for its presentation on this item.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Assistant Planner Robert Smith. I'll be giving the presentation. The project is located at 709 Hickey Boulevard, and the project area is outside the public right-of-way, adjacent to the Fairmont Shopping Centre. The applicant has proposed to install antennas entirely within the freestanding sign and locate all associated equipment on the roof of the adjoining building. In staff's analysis, we support the application for the project complies with all zoning requirements. The proposed facility is located in the least obtrusive location and design with limited size, installation within the freestanding sign, and the equipment facility screened from surrounding views. When weighing its decision, the Planning Commission should remain mindful of the unique legal requirements that apply to the consideration of wireless facility applications. Unlike most land use decisions where the Planning Commission may exercise broad discretion, federal and state law limit the extent of permissible local regulation of wireless facilities. These are discussed in detail in the staff report, and of note, discussion of health impacts for RF emissions is restricted to applicants' evidence of compliance with FCC regulations. The Planning Commission should make a decision based on the time limits applied by the FCC shot clock, and Article 26 of the zoning regulations primarily governs the physical appearance and placement of facilities. So in staff's analysis, we've concluded that the project complies with all federal, state and local laws governing wireless communication facilities, including compliance with all zoning provisions contained in Article 26 of the Pacifica zoning regulations. For this reason, staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the project as specifically stated in the staff report motion, and the applicant is present and available for questions if required.
Thanks so much for that report. I'm going to go ahead then, prior to opening a public hearing, and see if the members of the commission have any clarifying questions or comments at this point. And I see Commissioner Cooper may have some questions.
Yeah, I just had a question for you. I mean, the sign, it seems to be 2 feet taller than what the original sign permit was for. Can you explain why they wanted to go additional 2 feet taller than the 60 feet?
I'm not aware why the particular increase in the height of the sign. I believe it was the structure of the sign on top of the pole. That may be a good question for the applicant.
Okay. The other question I had is that in the previous shopping center that we reviewed last time, we had a signage plan or a signage guideline that we were able to look at. I guess, was there any restriction on the square footage of the face of the sign? It seems to be a lot bigger than what the current sign is as far as the overall square footage. And do you have any?
Yeah, the master sign program sets out the requirement for signs in the shopping centre, and the sign as it is at the moment was submitted through the building permit process. When the original sign was submitted, it was approved by an amendment to the master sign program, and that was back in 1998. When the new sign was submitted, it was reviewed as part of the building permit process, and the planner at the time deemed that due to the minor change in the nature of the sign in terms of its height and its size and its amended location that puts it outside of the Caltrans right-of-way, that the changes that they were proposing were de minimis changes.
But do we have any clear understanding of what the square footage of the existing sign is and what increase we're going to currently have with this new larger sign?
Well, the proposed sign is 20 feet tall by 22 feet wide. And I'd have to check what the previous.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm a big sign freak because I don't like huge signs, and it seems like this is much bigger than the current sign that's out there. And I was just curious of if that's allowed. I would assume it is, according to the calculations that you did on the last report. And I was just curious of what the thought was, is why we allow such a larger, not such a larger, but a larger sign than what's currently out there.
So to clarify, the sign is already approved, and so it was approved prior to current staff being in our current positions. And so this is a little different than the analysis of the sign that you had at the last meeting, where it was a new sign coming forward. So here we're dealing with a sign that staff had already approved, and they're adding the wireless facility to it. So I understand your questions, but unfortunately, we don't have all of the background as to the analysis done for that sign.
And the existing sign has wireless in it now.
Yes.
Correct.
Commissioner Behringer, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, Commissioner Cooper, the reason the sign is bigger is probably to accommodate the 5G antennas because they're larger. When you look at the face of the sign, the actual face of the Safeway Rite Aid, it's smaller than the actual physical structure So when I looked at it, I thought that they possibly were just trying to create a box for the antennas to be placed, but I don't know that the face of the sign that is actually the signage is bigger than what was on the other sign. But it is hard to compare, because I tried to do that even with the big plans.
Thank you, Commissioner Behringer. Looks like, any further questions at this point? Okay. Well, I think what we'll do then is go ahead and open the public hearing, and the way we do that, of course, is that we afford the applicant the opportunity to make any comments the applicant would care to, and perhaps some of the questions you've raised might be touched on by the applicant, and perhaps some other things will be shared as well. So I'm forgetting the exact number of minutes. I don't know if this is typically, is it 10 when it's the applicant? Is that our ordinary practice?
Yes.
Okay, and you're invited to take as much or as little of that time as you need.
Great. Oh, my name is Tracy Lum. I'm with MCG Architecture. I'm actually here on behalf of Kimco Realty. And yeah, we're relocating 6 existing signs from the existing pylon that's in the Caltrans property and relocating it over to a newer pylon that's on the Kimco property. With that, there will be 6 total existing signs that will be moving over from the old to the new pylon, and then plus 3 additional antennas for T-Mobile.
Thank you. Looks like Commissioner Clifford had a comment or question.
Well, is there anybody here from T-Mobile or any of the cell companies? No. Okay, because I do have a question in terms of if these antennas are both transmitting and receiving, is there any kind of signage or protection that lets workers on the sign know that the antennas need to be shut off before they go up there and work on the sign?
They're
There are.
required by law.
Okay, I didn't see them on the plans. I just wanted to make certain that one aspect is taken care of, that any workers working on the signs are protected and safe.
We certainly can add a sign, up
Well,
on the bottom of the pylon.
apparently it's a law that you have to
Sure.
make sure that somebody knows that they got to shut it off if they
Right.
shut the cell towers off if they're going to work up there.
Okay. Yeah, and it's all within the sign face, so you don't actually see the antennas.
Right, but if we have storms, the sign breaks, somebody goes up to fix it, they got to
Right.
know that they got to shut those things off before
Understood.
they get up there.
Yes.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Lum. Maybe perhaps you can have a seat, and if we have any other comments or questions.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, stand by. I guess one of my colleagues, Commissioner Cooper, maybe had another question.
I just have one more question. Is this a standard Kimco sign? I mean, is this what you guys normally put up? I mean, it seems kind of boring.
Yeah, that's what they propose. AdArt is their vendor, and this is what they're proposing.
So, okay.
Yeah.
The other concern that I would have is the cladding that you have on the outside. I know that area gets a lot of wind, so I'd just be really careful on how you put your cladding on that pole.
Yeah,
Make sure
we
it
can
stays on.
engineer it to make sure that it
Just a warning.
can take all the wind
Cool.
weathering.
I do like the fact that you guys incorporated the antennas within the sign, so I don't have to
Yes.
see the
Right.
antennas, and I think that's, just like the current sign, I think that's important, so.
Mm-hmm.
And I did look at the width of that sign. It seems to be a lot thicker than the other sign, but I was looking at the configuration of the antennas. It looks like you're pretty much crammed those antennas
Yeah,
within that 4
exactly.
feet, so. Okay, that's all I have to say. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Lum. Well, I don't have any other speaker cards for this item, so I'm extrapolating from that nobody else is interested in speaking to the item. So I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing then and bring the matter back to the commission for any comment or discussion. Commissioner Clifford.
Well, I want to express my disappointment that nobody came from either T-Mobile or any of the other cell companies that are having these new cell towers installed. I think they should have been available for questions.
Noted. Commissioner Behringer.
Yeah, I agree with my fellow commissioner. I think they should have had a representative here to at least handle that part of it. I work in the industry, so I could probably answer most of the questions, but I shouldn't be doing that on behalf of the applicant. I like the project. I think it's always good when you can stealth a telecommunications facility. The next one I would love to see stealth is the one at Sharp Park and, where is it? And Skyline. Every time I drive by it, it's the ugliest thing I've ever seen. And I understand our ordinances at the time did not require a stealth, but we should probably put a pin in that and visit that next time they need a mod or something, that we would love to see that stealth. I think it's the right way to do it, and I think it's a good project, and I support it.
Well, I don't see any more lights, so I'm going to go ahead and take the liberty of saying a couple things. One, I have to say, I thought that the staff report did a really super job at kind of laying out, all the issues, and it was pretty easy to follow, and I'm not somebody who works in the industry, so I come at it with a little less kind of background, but I was still able to kind of track what the issues were. And as somebody who lives up in that area, relatively close to that area, I myself think the sign looks fine. I don't have any particular issue with the sizes contemplated, and so I'm in support of the project. Would have been nice if somebody from one of the cell phone companies was here to talk to it, but I intend to support the project. Commissioner Clifford?
I'm ready to make a motion unless other people want to speak.
Okay, why don't you go ahead?
All right. I move that the Planning Commission find that the project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, approve use permit UP 082-17 and specific plan SP 162-17 by adopting the attached resolution, including conditions of approval in Exhibit A and incorporating all maps and testimony into the record by reference.
Thank you. Commissioner Cooper?
I'll second the motion.
All right, I've got a motion, a second. Why don't we go ahead and vote? Okay, so that's approved unanimously, 4 votes to none. Well, thank you, Mr. Lum, for coming, and thank you for the staff report. So that takes us then to rent increase application, RIA 1-16, filed by applicant Law Offices of Mark Hayslip pursuant to Pacifica Municipal Code Section 9-4.2455E to increase the rent by 25% or to market rate, whichever is lower, upon the expiration of each tenant's term at 435 Gateway Drive, and this a number of assessor parcel numbers pertaining to this property. In Pacifica, the site is a multifamily apartment complex approved for a condominium conversion, and the recommended CEQA action on this matter is Class 1 categorically exempt, CEQA Guidelines, Section 15301 and Section 15061B3. Recommended action from staff is to determine the minimum requirements of Pacifica Municipal Code Section 9-4.2455E for rent increase have been met. Staff report then.
So I just wanted to introduce, she's been here before, but reintroduce Cindy Ganos, who's a contract planner helping us out with this project, who will be presenting the staff report.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Chair, members of the commission, the project consists of the 170-unit Marymount Gateway Apartments located at 435 Gateway Drive. In 2008, the Planning Commission approved an application for a condominium conversion with a parking exception, tentative condo map, and a use permit to convert the apartments to condominiums. The final map subdividing the project into condominiums and common parcels was recorded in 2014. To date, no units have been sold as condominiums, and the owner continues to rent the units. As part of the condominium conversion approval, the applicant was required to enter into an inclusionary zoning compliance agreement and provide an affordable unit marketing program. The zoning compliance agreement required that 26 units be offered for sale at below market rate. BMR is the terms I'll use for that throughout, with 13 restricted to low income and another 13 restricted to low or moderate income households. Both the inclusionary zoning compliance agreement and the affordable unit marketing program focus on the sale of the individual units and do not address rental provisions. The Pacifica Municipal Code requires that for a condominium conversion to occur, a tenant's rent shall neither increase within 2 months of the conversion application nor for 2 years from the filing of the application or until relocation takes place. At the end of that 2-year period, any increase in rent must be approved by the Planning Commission. The code provides that when reviewing an application for rent increase, the Planning Commission shall consider 3 factors: prevailing rents for similar units, the residential rent component of the Bay Area cost of living increase, and the condition of the unit. The code does not say how much weight each factor should be given. The applicant has noted that despite the conversion to condominiums, they have no immediate intention of offering any of the units for sale. Therefore, he's requesting a consideration for the rent increase. The details of the proposal are outlined in the staff report and in the attachments, but in general, the applicant proposes that the tenants in place when their current lease expires have a rent increase of 25% or to market rate, whichever is less, and that when a new tenant comes in, they pay market rate, and that after the initial one-year lease, the rent would only be increased no more than 10% at the time of renewal. And then also that any tenants that are over the age of 62 as of August of 2014 or have a verifiable disability, the rent not be increased more than 10% a year. The inclusionary zoning compliance agreement required that the 26 units be offered at BMR prices. However, the agreement only addressed those for sale. So currently, there are no affordability restrictions on the complex. So the applicant is offering, as part of the proposed rent increase, to establish 26 units as BMR restricted units upon the adoption of the resolution. So the units on the site which particular units are designated in the agreement for the BMR units. So as the existing tenants' lease terms who currently occupy these units expire, the applicant will let them know that they are eligible and may apply for the BMR status, and they must provide proof of income eligibility. If the current tenant does not qualify, they will be given right to the first available unit. That's comparable with the rent increase to market rate or 25%, whichever is less. If they choose to relocate, they will pay reasonable moving expenses either to another apartment in the complex or to another location in Pacifica. The applicant, if the occupant chooses not to relocate but does not income qualify for the unit, the applicant has said that he will pay the difference between the income restricted BMR rate and the market rate to the city to use in the city's affordable housing fund. So, as noted before, so that's really describes the applicant's proposal. So as I've said before, the three factors: prevailing rents, residential rent component of the cost of living, and the condition of units. So to address the rent component, we had a rent survey prepared. We looked at 10 apartment projects, over 1,000 units in the city, and we called them, asked a series of questions related to their units, the size, the rents, and the amenities. So we did a weighted average, and what that means is it kind of minimizes the highs and the lows. So if most of the rents were $2,000, that got the greatest weight. And what it came down to is for one bedroom, one bath units, the weighted average was about $2,800. For two bedroom, one bath, it was about $3,300, and for two bedroom, two bath, it was about $3,500. The applicant provided a rent roll with his application in April of 2016. So the difference in the weighted market rents and the weighted average of the rents that are currently being charged at the site ranges from 39 to 46% lower than average market rents. So we did a spreadsheet that's an attachment to your staff report. So just looking at the applicant's proposal of market rate or 25%, whichever is less, 4 of the units are currently at above market, so they could have no increase. 138 could have their rents increased by 25% and still not reach market, and 3 of the units could have an increase of 25% that could only go to market because over 25 would violate the above market. So related to the residential rent component of the Bay Area cost of living. It's a mouthful. The Consumer Price Index has many components, and rent is one of them. And rent, they actually have two kinds of rent. None of them actually have the exact terminology of the city's code, which says residential rent component. There's a shelter index, and there's a primary residence index within the CPI. So over the last the last year, the residential rent component increased by 6.9%, and the shelter by 6.4%. So in the 6 range, and that's just over the last year, where the consumer price index increased by 3.5. So the consumer price increase is low, but the rent component of that is very high. So historical data of just that rent component isn't readily available, just the CPI is. So I wanted to just I picked a couple of percentages to compound to kind of give you an idea. If going back to 2008, when the condo conversion was approved, if you did an increase of 3% a year, compounding that from 2008 until now would be an increase of 27%. If you did 5%, compounding that would be an increase of 48%, just to kind of give you an order of magnitude. The third component is the condition of the units. The San Mateo County Health Department conducts inspections of the apartment complexes. We contacted the inspection manager of the program and got information on the inspections from 2015 through 2017. There were some issues in 2016. They were found to be cleared when they went back and did a reinspection, and the 2017 inspection found no violations. That gives you the basics of the staff report. I want to make sure you saw in attachment 8 were comment letters received. You also got additional ones tonight, and some had been emailed through the process as they were received. So in summary, according to the code and the 3 factors that we've discussed, staff recommends Planning Commission find the minimum requirements have been met for a rent increase and move to approve the resolution.
Thank you. Let's see if any of my fellow commissioners have any comments or questions for staff at this point. Looks like they all do. So Commissioner Cooper, we'll start with you.
Great, thank you, Chair. I have a couple questions in regards to the BMRs. It said part of the requirement was remain affordable for 45 years. When does that start? Does that start when they did the conversion, or does that start when they built the units? When does that start to toll? Is that?
It was a condition of the sale.
So 45 years after the conversion was applied for? Okay.
After the units have sold.
After the unit's sold.
Sold.
Yes.
So once
And
they actually
none have sold.
None have sold yet.
Right.
So the 45 years would run from the time that a property is sold to an individual unit owner.
So it's tolled until it sells. Okay. The other question that I had was on the percent increase that you see from 2008 to 2017. You're showing a 3% and a 3.5%. What has the real estate been doing as far as from 2008 to 2016 as far as the annual increase? I know the rents have increased, but have the sales increased more than the rents, or have they increased less than the rents as far as value of property prices?
I don't have that data.
Okay. And then the last question I had was that part of the attachment F that I saw, and this is primarily for sales, I understand, but it says the city intends to contract with an outside agency which shall be responsible for selection and qualification of buyers in accordance with city-approved guidelines for the BMR restrictions. Do we have any oversight in that, or is that strictly relied upon the property owner to do those BMR qualifications, or does the city provide those?
So for the for sale units, this is something that the city has some experience doing, and we actually use a housing contractor that'll help with that.
Right. What about the rent?
But this is for the for sale units, and we do income qualify prior to sale.
Okay, what about the rent, though? I mean, we're talking about the differential between a qualified candidate below market value rents and market rents. So who does that qualification?
So I think if I am understanding the question correctly, there's an agreement set in place for affordable sales and homeownership.
Well, I think that he's offered
Oh, okay, so.
the status of BMR units that does not qualify for BMR units. And the D1 is applicant to pay in housing fund should an unqualified BMR unit occupant stay in the unit. So who determines what that value is?
So what we're proposing, and is outlined in the resolution, is that the city enter into a formal agreement with this property owner, similar to the for sale agreement, and that agreement will stipulate who does what.
Who does what in that agreement?
In this BMR
Okay.
compliance.
And some of the other the ordinances that I was reading in regards to it, he's offering the things that I've seen in other cities and other counties. But one thing that I haven't seen is he offering a relocation assistance for those people who can't afford it, or is he offering a moving expense to any of those tenants who can't no longer afford those rents? Has that been proposed by the client or the person?
I don't think so. I think it was only related to BMR units and their relocation.
So he hasn't offered that in okay.
Thank
you,
you,
Chair.
Commissioner Cooper. Commissioner Behringer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a number of questions for staff. I guess my question is on a number of the things that we approve, we will put a sunset on if they haven't commenced with the transition or construction, that the rights that we've granted them expire. I didn't see that in any of the material. Is it buried somewhere? I mean, I got to tell you.
So in this instance, the subdivision itself, the condo conversion,
Yeah?
has been recorded.
What do
So
you mean
the-
recorded? You mean just the plat map?
The map is recorded. That's
Okay, but what
correct.
about all the other associated documentation you would have in connection with a condo? Has that been
As
recorded?
far as the CC&Rs, for
CC&Rs, the
example,
HOA agreement, bylaws, has any of that been done?
I have not, I've looked for that, and I have not seen that that's been completed.
Okay, and then, so, but again, is there a sunset on if they haven't commenced it, does this go on forever?
Now that the condo map is recorded, they exist, and
Yeah, but they're not really a condo. Right? I mean, he's recorded a map, but it's not really a condo. There's no association, there's no bylaws, there's no CC&Rs, it's just a plat map. So how does that operate? I mean, I don't even know if he has an entity that is registered with the state to do business. I mean, there's a whole lot of technical things that I'm not seeing here. So I'm wondering what their real intentions are, and that's really where I'm headed with this line of questioning.
so I'm going to defer to the city attorney on.
My understanding is that a condo is created and exists once it's recorded as such. And in this case, we have a sole owner of the various condos, the 160 some odd condos that are in the complex. And there is no there may or may not be an association agreement, but irrespective of whether or not there is, the condos exist by virtue of having been recorded as such.
Right. I'm not sure that the Bureau of Real Estate agrees with that, but let's assume that that is 100% correct. Then my question is, when are we going to identify the BMR units and record the deed restrictions on those? If that is, I don't think that's been done. Or has it?
That would be done at time of sale.
No, it would be recorded in advance of the sale, because you have to identify them before you can qualify people for them.
Right.
Because in theory, he could conveniently, I mean, we want them to be identified, right? That's a condition of the deal. We want them recorded now, because in theory, he can sell them and, oh, sorry, I forgot to record them as BMR units. Oh, well, what are we going to do?
The units themselves are called out in the agreement.
So
Which units
has that
they
been
are.
recorded against their deed?
The agreement has not been recorded, so no.
Okay.
That's right, it has not been.
I guess my question is, if he wants to be in the condo business, he should be in the condo business. If he wants to be in the apartment rental business, he should be in the apartment rental business. I have to tell you, I spent a lot of time going over this. He's got every tenant in there on a month-to-month lease, which you would think would make business sense if you were contemplating a condominium conversion, but it's been like that for quite some time. And here we are as a planning commission taking our time to talk about a rent control issue when we probably should be, in my mind, spending our time on land use issues, not policy issues. I know that's not staff's issue, but, okay. Those are really my questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Behringer. Commissioner Clifford.
And I also have a lot of questions, some revolving around whether or not the condo conversion has met all of its requirements, because there were also, I was one of the commissioners that approved the condo conversion back in 2008. The anticipation and what we expected was that they would actually be converted and sold. And that never happened, or didn't happen until 2014, which certainly wasn't what we expected. And there are conditions of approval that I'm not clear have ever been met. There's a condition of approval for power hookups for electric cars in the garage. There's a condition of approval for Energy Star appliances. I'm not seeing that those things have happened, and I haven't heard from staff that they have.
I can't speak to things that don't need a building permit, such as Energy Star appliance upgrades, but everything on that list that would need a building permit, which there are many, there's no record that they have completed those improvements.
So nothing that requires a building permit has been done yet?
Correct.
Okay. So there's a cloud over this whole thing, and part of it is just the amount of time that's gone on since the original decision to allow the condo conversion. So I have issues with that. I'm going to get into some of my other questions right now, though. Can the Planning Commission change the rate of increase? And can it change the timing of increase? We're talking, the timings have been laid out and the rate of increase has been laid out. I want to know if we have the ability, if we feel that they're not correct, to change them.
So I'll let the city attorney answer your question about the percentage increase, but I wanted to address the concept of the prospective rent increases. So the fact that this ordinance, this condo conversion ordinance, was written under the assumption, when I read it at least, clearly under the assumption that the condo will be completed, the condo conversion will be completed and the units will be sold, complicates, I think, this hearing. And I'm not comfortable. We can change things if this is the direction of the commission, but I'm not comfortable recommending to you approval of prospective rent increases, because I can't say that the three factors that the Planning Commission must determine for a rent increase are going to be still valid a year from now, 2 years from now. So our recommendation is for the single rent increase that would happen now, not for prospective rent increases. I'll go ahead and let the city attorney answer the second part.
Yeah, with respect to your question about changing the rate that is proposed, we would not be able to do that today. We would want to return to the applicant and ask the applicant to come back with a new proposal, given the direction that is received from the Planning Commission today. But the resolution that's before you and the application that's before you wouldn't allow you to change the proposed rate of increase in the decision that's before you tonight.
So if we were to come to that conclusion, we would have to continue with direction.
Certainly, and I think this is your opportunity, if it's the commission's appetite, to provide direction to the applicant right now on what sort of rent increase you may or may not think is appropriate. and the applicant can then return with a altered application that reflects your direction or doesn't reflect your direction.
Okay, thank you. No, I know I have other questions here. I'll skip that one. In terms of, can the Planning Commission change the tenants over 62 to read at the date of adoption instead of August 14th, 2014? Is that a similar answer that we would have to continue and give direction on that?
Yes.
Okay. In terms of the BMRs, I noticed that there was a heading for low income, and then there was a heading for moderate income. I didn't see anything for very low income or extremely low income in terms of the rental agreement. And how is that handled, is the end question.
So HUD does have definitions for extremely low and very low income. However, our ordinance, which is our guiding document in this deliberation, does not provide for units that are addressing those income categories. So the analysis was done based on the low and moderate as described in the ordinance.
Okay, so does that mean that at some point we're going to have to look at the ordinance again and have it rewritten to reflect these other levels of income?
Certainly, if we need to change the ordinance in order to consider different policy procedures, yes, it would need to be amended.
Okay, thank you for that. And you've already answered my question about the prospectus. I had another question on that. I did want to know who's going to be responsible for the cost of vetting for the BMR units. Is that's still part of an agreement not written yet?
Correct.
Okay. Because one of our considerations is the what the complex is, how the complex is in terms of marketability, I want to say livability. Is there any possibility of doing some kind of a tour of both the complex and some individual units?
Well, I certainly understand that the applicant can take individuals on a tour. I think if all the units are occupied, getting into them is perhaps not necessarily able to be done unless there was a tenant that's willing to open their unit.
Okay, because we have several letters in here, some which are complaining of mold, mice, rats, and also of equipment that's not currently functioning. So I'd like to actually be able to see that if it actually exists, one way or the other. I'd like to know. We'll have to leave that out there in terms of when we have discussion.
Thank you. I just had a couple of additional questions, if I could. And I know that this letter just came in on the 19th from Legal Aid Society, but I'm wondering if the city attorney's office had an opportunity to kind of think through the kind of the points raised here. There's the particular reference to the Ferguson-Williams et al. Case v. Marymount Gateway, and I was trying to get my brain around some of the arguments that are raised here about whether or not requisite steps for the condominium conversion have actually taken place, whether Judge Weiner's order spoke to that or not. I was wondering if you had any comment at all or whether this made any difference in terms of staff's analysis of or recommendation at this point.
Sure, yeah. I just received the letter when I sat down here, so I haven't done a thorough in-depth analysis. My initial reaction is that with respect to the portion of the letter citing to Section 94.2455 and the Michael Ferguson case, what's before you tonight is the application for the rent increase, not the condo conversion. And what's being articulated here is that some of the findings that were made in approving the conversion may not have been appropriately made. Well, that is obviously, as you know, not before us, and the condo conversion has been done, it's been recorded, the statute of limitations for challenging that condo conversion has since lapsed. And so with respect to the question of whether or not notice was served, I think that the opportunity to challenge that has indeed passed with the running of the statute of limitations. And the question that we are presented with tonight really does not hinge on notification for approval of the condo conversion.
Okay. Well, thank you for your comments on that, and I guess if Ms. Gibson is here and has anything else to say about it, she can share that with us. A couple of additional questions, and I guess as I was reading through the factors here in the staff report, which again I appreciate was laid out in I think a user-friendly way, a rather complicated matter that I think I was able to follow because of the way this was organized. The residential rent component of the Bay Area Cost of Living Index, and sort of considering that as a factor, one of the things that I was sort of curious about is whether or not, sort of from a legislative intent perspective, you all thought of sort of the notion of, I mean, again, we have a lot of analysis taking us back to 2008 or taking us back, quite a ways. I was sort of myself thinking through, the extent to which we have some discretion to look at, how big a change this actually constitutes over the course of a relatively short period of time. Within 25% strikes me as a pretty big bite at one time, recognizing that if we go back to 2008, it maybe isn't, but sort of thinking through the economic realities of what that means to various people. I'm just curious about, whether or not there was in the staff report at the time that, the ordinance was prepared, there was any sort of insight as to how that factor ought to be construed. I mean, I think it's a little unfortunate that so much time has passed that we're now looking at this, and again, if you look at the increase in component over an extended period of time, again, 25% may reflect some reality, but it's a lot in a short time frame.
Right. I guess I can only answer that question indirectly, which is, I feel that in reading this ordinance and how we're applying it now to a condo conversion that happened so long ago, is that this particular situation we find ourselves in was not contemplated, and that it probably was contemplating a rent increase that would happen one time, fairly close to after the condo conversion was approved, 2 years maybe, while they were finishing things up, and not this far out.
Right. Thank you. I guess, and my other question goes to the third factor then that we're looking at, and that's sort of the condition of the unit. And as somebody who works for the county, and I've done some work with the housing department, I mean, it's a little concerning to me that this was one of the units that was on that sort of work plan that the Department of Housing put together with respect to inspecting through environmental health. And, I guess one of my questions is the extent to which, the sense of, how, the particular conditions of this particular complex compares to the other complexes that were looked at to develop kind of the market rent that we're talking about, and whether it's really appropriate to use market rent, unless, again, this is sort of within the broad range of average conditions that, that we're dealing with in the city.
That is a very good question. We can come back to you with some information on the various developments that were in the survey, and just see if they're also
Okay, that would be helpful to me, because I'd like to know.
on the county's list and how their inspections went.
Thank you. I think that would be a useful thing for me as I think about that third factor in particular. Looks like we've exhausted the lights here for the commissioners, which means that we should probably go ahead then and open the public hearing. If Mr. Hayslip is here, or someone for the applicant, it would be appropriate for us to take his comment at this time, and he'll have 10 minutes to present any matters he'd care to the commission.
Good evening. My name is Gary Meyer. I'm a resident of Pacifica since '71, a business owner. I spoke to you folks back in '07 when we originally asked for the application to convert to condos. I want to assure you that all the things that we were supposed to do to get it to be a condo, the required permits were all done. The Star appliances were intended to be replaced at the time of the sale so that new owners would get all new appliances. So we have replaced over the years, stoves and dishwashers and all these kinds of things, and we've done it with Energy Star, but that is the reason they haven't all been done. Excuse me. It is my understanding that we have done all the things that are required to make it a condo, which includes the articles of incorporation that have been approved by the state and the CC&Rs that have been approved by the state. So those things have been done. Don't know what other questions you might have for me, and maybe I even might have an answer for one of them.
Thank you. I'm not sure if well, actually, it looks like Commissioner Cooper may have a question, so I'm going to go ahead and let him go ahead and ask.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't push my light, but I'll go ahead and ask the question, the question that I had. Some of these conditions that I've seen in some of the other agencies, rental agreements and whatnot, one has to do with relocation, should a tenant not be able to afford the rent increase. And is that something that you've considered to your existing tenants?
The original agreement does call for us to give relocation assistance, and so that would still be in effect. Now, how much right now, I don't remember what it is, but the original agreement calls for it.
But what about if you're not going to convert it to a sale, and we're just talking about increasing the rents, and a tenant can't afford the increase, and so that tenant has to move out, is that something you've considered to those tenants who really can't afford that 30%, 25% increase?
Well, it's 25,
25,
not
yes.
30. And to answer your question, I don't know what the legality is, whether we should or shouldn't, or we're required to or not, as far as rental people.
Yeah, it's not really a matter of any legal requirement. Have you considered that as an owner to your tenants?
I am but one of the owners, but I will
Okay.
say to you that we will give it some serious consideration.
Okay.
That's all I can say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Apologies to my colleagues. I was actually Commissioner Clifford's light, so nice job coming up with something there.
Okay, you stated that you've done all the work that required permits to meet the conditions of approval, but the planning director has stated that that's not the case. So I'm confused. I would like to know, did you actually install hookups for electric cars in the garage? That's one of the conditions of approval.
Yes, the answer is yes. We have put them in. Now, they're not in every garage. That was not a requirement. There was a requirement that we have, outlets for electric cars. And I misunderstood. I thought the answer was that everything, the required permits were done.
That's not what I heard.
Okay, I'm sorry. I apologize.
I was on the commission at that time, and I'm not clear that we didn't want them in, at least one in each garage.
Well, we would have to look at I don't believe so.
What other, Tina, what other things were required permits on that condition of approval? Because I'm hearing a conflict here, and I would like it resolved.
So I'm starting with the ordinance, and then I'll move on to the conditions of approval. So first of all, a C of O is required to complete the condo conversion, which would be the method to confirm all of the things I'm going to list. And that has not been done. And that would confirm the first requirement, which is all units as well as the common ownership facilities shall be brought into compliance with all applicable state and local zoning, building, housing, mechanical, fire codes, et cetera, which have, of course, gone through several code updates. Let's see. So each dwelling unit shall be served by gas and electrical services completely within the lot lines or ownership of space of each separate unit. No common gas or electrical connection service. Each dwelling unit shall have separate metering. A laundry area shall be provided on each unit, or if common laundry areas are provided, such units shall consist not less than one automatic. So depending on how they choose to comply, that could require a building permit. There's various minimum one-year warranty on various, common things in your home, such as the hot water tank. So if it's an older hot water tank and they can't provide a one-year warranty, that would need a building permit. All main building structures, fences, patio enclosures, carports, accessory buildings, sidewalks, driveways, et cetera, shall be refurbished and restored to achieve a high standard of appearance, quality, and safety, compliance with existing codes. And let me,
And as we're going through these, are these items that are predicates to the particular item we're considering this evening? I just want to make sure I'm understanding the...
they would be required prior to completion of the condo conversion, so prior to sale.
So,
Understood.
Wiring for plug-in vehicles in the new parking area and carports, wherever feasible. And then there's also various water runoff conditions of approval that we would need to at least inspect to make sure that they're designed correctly.
Thank you very much. So it sounds like there's still some work before the condo conversion is actually complete.
Right, and I know that work is done without permits all the time, but our permit history shows that that these improvements have not been completed.
Yeah, and they, in this regard, if they're before the Planning Commission, they certainly shouldn't be doing any work without a permit. Okay. So how many electrical outlets did you put in for cars?
I can't answer that. I believe there were 6 or 8 that were put in the parking area that was suggested, but I can't tell you an exact number.
So I'm going to ask that folks please allow the commission and the member of the public who's actually commenting right now to comment without background noise. You'll all have the opportunity, of course, to speak in due course.
For clarification, as I understood what was said by the planning director, the things that were, some of the things that haven't been done are things that we would want to do at the time we put them on the market, and not necessarily now.
Okay, I'm done questioning at this time.
Thank you, Commissioner Clifford. Commissioner Behringer, did you have a comment or question?
Yeah, I just have one question quickly for Tina and her associate. Let's just, I just want you to kind of walk me through the mechanics of this. Whatever decision we make at whatever time we make that decision, is that a one-time situation and we don't have to deal with this again, or is this going to continually come back to us for us to have to adjudicate it?
Well, as I said previously, on this initial recommendation, I didn't feel comfortable with a prospective rent increase because there's no way to know that the three factors that you must consider are still applicable in
Okay.
the future. I think that if the Planning Commission wanted to direct staff to craft a approval that indicated some sort of review by staff in the future, I mean, I think we can do that if that is your direction.
Okay.
But with this initial recommendation, I did not feel comfortable giving perspective. So to answer your question, yes, it could be coming back to you.
Okay, so then I have a question for the applicant. In response to that, I'm going to ask the question that everybody's thinking about. What's your intention, sir? Are you going to be a condo guy, or are you going to be an apartment owner?
Again, it's a business decision when we put them on the market. We have gone to a considerable expense to get it qualified to be a condo, and if we intended to keep them as rental for the next 30 years, I don't think we would have gone to that expense. When we do decide to put them on the market is really a business decision that I, as a minority owner, would make in conjunction with the rest of the owners. So for me to say to you, no, we're never going to do condos, or yes, we're going to do condos next week, either one of those would be, a guess on my part. But I can say to you that we didn't go to this expense and trouble to make them condos if that wasn't our ultimate goal.
And I understand taking it to the extreme to make the point, but is it reasonable to assume that sometime in the next 2 to 3 years you might consider converting it?
I apologize.
not
I'm
even
not,
willing-
I have a little hearing problem. I couldn't quite hear you.
Oh, okay.
I apologize.
Would it make sense for you to consider it sometime in the next 2 to 3? I'm looking for some kind of an understanding on the horizon, and I understand it's not going to be next week, and I understand it's not going to be forever.
I think
But
3
I'd
years-
like some reasonable input on when you think you
I
might
would
do
think
it.
3 years would be a logical conclusion, but again, I can't speak for the whole ownership group, but that would be reasonable in my regard.
Would you be willing to live with a restriction on that it has to be converted or the approvals go away?
Probably not. I mean, we have you see, the situation is that we've been under rent for many, many years. And it's hard to maintain the property in A1 condition if you're getting so low of rents. Had we been able to raise it 3% a year, we would be even getting more money than we're proposing here. So, yes, seems like 25% or market seems huge, but please understand that our loyal tenants have had a break for a good number of years.
Well, yeah, and I'm not here to take you to task for how long it's taken you to do this. But I do understand there's some tenants who think they're getting ready to buy a unit from you, and I know that was mentioned in a number of the letters that we've received, and of course, they're continuing to rent, and nothing's happening, so I understand their frustration. I just, from my standpoint, I look at the Planning Commission, this is my personal opinion, there's 4 of us here, there's 7 of us ultimately on the board. This is not what we're supposed to be doing tonight, is talking about rent control issues. We're supposed to be talking about land use. We've already decided the land use, and somehow or another, through a quirk of something that was drafted a long time ago, here we are talking about how much rent you should charge, which I don't think is something that any of us here on this dais think that we should be talking about, which is why I asked you the question, really, what's your intention? I mean, if your intention is to be a condo developer, that would make me feel more comfortable with going through the pain of dealing with this tonight.
Like I said, it is our goal. That's just the time frame is what I can't commit to.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Commissioner Clifford, do you have an additional question?
I had one additional question, and it goes back to a question I asked staff. If I wanted to tour the facilities, would somebody be available to take me through?
Of course. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. So we'll move then on to the other speakers that I have. I've got 3 speaker cards. If there's somebody who wants to speak to this matter who hasn't yet filled out a speaker card, I'd ask you to please do that at this time and go ahead and bring them up to staff here at the table. That said, I'm going to go ahead then and start with Gwen Aponte, followed by Leo Leon. You'll have 3 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to you tonight. My name is Gwen Aponte, and I am here representing Marymount Gateway and Summit Apartments. I am the property manager. I've been here at Marymount since November 16, 2016, and I manage 170 units, 2 in-house maintenance workers, and numerous vendors in order to make our property run efficiently. Here are a few facts, and we've already addressed some of them. I've heard them. We have paid $19,332 in maintenance supplies to make sure we have addressed every issue that arises. We do annual inspections, and I have a list for the past 2 years, and approximately 35% of these tenants have had to have smoke alarms and carbon monoxide detectors replaced because the tenant removed them. Our concern is to be compliant, so we replace them. We have the luxury of saying we have a heated pool and spas, but to have that luxury, we pay $3,300 a year. This past winter was so harsh, it literally tore off the shingles on the roofs. To fully repair over each unit, it costs $1,800. We have 85 upper units. If we were to fix roofs over every apartment, we are talking approximately $150,000. We are waterproofing the exterior walls to prevent the effects of the harsh winter we just had. And if you were a tenant that was affected, we took care of the cost to repair and/or to clean the damage to the apartment. Water, sewer, and trash is included in the rent, and those fees continue to get increased. 90 days ago, the water bill was $17,000. Last month, it was $20,000, and on July 1st, there's going to be another increase. The trash bill is a constant $18,000 per month. In order to keep up with the high cost of energy, we want to replace all the exterior lights with energy-efficient lamps. Our electric bill is approximately $13,000 per month. Since the opening of the 7-Eleven, we've had to upgrade our pest control package. Sometimes it's effective, sometimes it's not, and I continue to struggle with that. We have tenants that have lived here over 10 years and are now getting newer energy-efficient appliances if we find our technician recommends it. We are upgrading our on-site washers and dryers to newer energy-efficient ones. The numbers are astounding. We have 170 units, 116 tenants pay under $2,000 per month, 60% of those pay under $1,600, and they have lived here over 7 years. Without an increase in the rent, yet to maintain the property, the costs have doubled. I've researched the market value of the apartments in the community, and what we have is larger apartments and below market rents. I have a list of people that wanted to come that are in favor of the rental increase, but in order to save time, we just had this signed. This is my inspection report of people that I've had to literally replace a lot of the fixtures that they have because they removed them. And we do that at no cost to the tenant. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Aponte. Were those things that you intended to give to staff, the list and the
I can give them the whole thing. Yep.
the names? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Leon, followed by Marcelino Robles.
Good evening, Commissioners, staff. I had the privilege of serving on the Planning Commission, sat on it when we approved this project, and I think it would pay worth the time to review those minutes of those meetings if you haven't already, because the tenor of the applicant at the time and the need for affordable housing by the conversion of these condos was a major selling point in the approval, along with the conditions, including stormwater runoff. There was supposed to be bioswales installed prior to approval as well as a condition, along with downspouts redirected towards, away from the paved areas onto the bioswale. So there's some pretty important things up there for the number of roofs that they have up there. But the main issue that I want to say is that we entered into an agreement, a condo conversion agreement. That agreement hasn't happened, it hasn't been fulfilled by the applicant. And I my opinion is that we should hold the conditions of those condo conversion to hold them firm. We shouldn't be talking about rent. We should be talking about the condo conversion that was approved at the request of the applicant, at the urging of the applicant. The applicant had the entire residency of that, those buildings up there down here clamoring to buy those places. And you know as well as I do from our regional housing allotments, where we fall short is in affordable housing. These below market rate is exactly what we need to be doing. So I don't know what latitude staff has, the attorneys has, but we need to get on thinking about the condo conversion. So that's really the main thing I wanted to do. From looking at the paperwork, it appears that some of the rents are extraordinarily high. I don't think they were that high in 2008. So if increases in rent are supposed to come to the Planning Commission for approval, did that happen? I don't know if anybody knows that. You might want to see what the rent history is since 2008 up there. There might be some, depending on what the city regulations. So the language, talking about rent control, I agree. But anything that changes should be thoroughly vetted, and I can't believe that we have 26 units that people have to qualify for, and nobody has a clue as to whether they qualify or not, and we need those units for a population that's not being served. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leon. Mr. Robles, followed by Kristen Corbin. Good evening.
One of those people who was
A little closer to the mic, thank you.
the sign in that first, in 2008, for the condominium. I agree with the guy, the first one. I was one of those people who signed in it. And so far, we have not heard about it. What I got now is about the rent increase. All this time, we're expecting all that condominium stuff that they have told us. So I come before you because if we have this rent increase for us, I'm not talking about the condominium anymore, it's gonna hurt me and my family because of the rent increase that would be suddenly increase here and making us relocate somewhere that could present us tremendous burden, going to commute to work. And my wife and I would not like to have that kind of a situation, and I would like to ask the commission to disapprove the request.
Thank you, Mr. Robles. Ms. Corbin, followed by Michelle Pollard.
Good evening. I've been a tenant for between 13 to 14 years in these apartments. And when I moved here, one of the biggest draws to me, something that was a make or break, was laundry facilities and storage. I have a lot of things from my life. You know, we all have our yearbooks and all the things that we carry with us wherever we move. If you're lucky enough to own a home, you put those in your garage. So I needed storage for all of my excessive things that you don't want in your living room. I don't know, when they started this condo conversion, they took away my storage unit. So now everything that I had in storage, and I had a nice, huge double storage unit, is now stacked up in my living room. And I don't like people coming over because of that. It looks like hoarders. And then secondly, they took away our tennis court, which my daughter really enjoyed when it was in, and changed that to a parking lot. So they haven't made improvements in my apartment for the 13 to 14 years I've been there. Never once has the paint been repainted. I've never had my carpets cleaned. There's never been anyone from the city in to inspect my apartment in the 14 years I've been there. So that for you to see, I'd be more than welcome to have you in and see where I live. I sleep at night with the lights on because we have rats, not mice, we have rats. That I saw one, last night run across my living room floor. I sleep with a ruler next to me because I'm afraid of, it's not only unnerving, it's unsanitary. The BMR, with this rent increase, would be someone who my family would be homeless. So I went to the Pacifica Resource Center, and they told me about BMR. It's where I learned about it. And they said I needed to get the application from the owners. And the owners said they don't have applications for BMR. And that the units, my unit is not a unit that is one of the BMR units, so that I'm stuck. I just want to say quickly, the only appliance I have is one that PG&E gave me for free. When they replaced my stove, they replaced it with one from another unit, so it's not new appliances going in. I have an old stove. When I have a leak in my bathtub that is not a drip, it's a constant leak. I could fill a tub within a day that they say is unfixable because the building is old and the pipes and what have you, it's in the walls, so they can't stop the running of the leak. And I can't keep water in my bathtub because it just constantly drains out. So major issues that are not addressed.
Thank you, Ms. Corbett.
Thank
you. Ms. Pollard, followed by Teresa Tolibas.
Good evening. I have been renting these units for several years and just really distressed about the conditions of the units, in particular the garbage recycling. It's always overflowing. To hear about tenants that have rats and mice, it's very concerning. I've seen roaches, tons of ants. The repairs they talk about that they've completed for the winter. When you drive behind my apartment unit, you can see where the damage has occurred from the rain. Part of the fence is coming down, and we're concerned with other additional heavy rains that there's going to be damage to our cars. So every time we have a heavy rain, we're wondering how far and how soon we might see damage to our cars because of the fence coming down. The laundry room. I'm looking forward. I probably have pictures for you to see the garbage constantly on the floor. I've had clothes that I wash that they smell moldy when I get them out of the washing machine because they never repair or fix the washing machines. I've actually called the management and asked them what's going on with the washing machines, and they said that they're having problems with whoever installed them, and so we have to go across the street to wash our clothes if we wanted to wash them. The appliances, they've never been repaired. I moved in, everything was old. I've complained several times about the dishwasher being, the water doesn't leak. It doesn't drain, has not been repaired yet. We moved to this community so that we had an we had an opportunity to live in a place that we would be able to enjoy the parks, the amenities in this community. But living in that apartment, and we look right across the street, and you could see the units are painted beautifully. The grass is green, but then you look to our units, and it looks like a really poor community. It's sad.
Thank you, Ms. Pollard. Ms. Tolibas, followed by Edgardo Cerrone.
Good evening, Commissioners. My family and I have lived at this complex for 13 years, or a little bit over 13 years in this particular unit. And I'm here to really strongly disagree on its status as a condominium, because we feel that they haven't done anything to communicate to the tenants their plans to turn this into a condominium. There's no marketing. Commissioner Clifford, you mentioned in the 2014 compliance agreement, I saw that it says within 90 days of the agreement they had to provide the city with a description of its marketing sales. I don't know if they've done that to you guys. They haven't certainly communicated that to us. And then I saw also on the attached agenda that the list of items that they sent you with the rent, the current rents My particular unit's incorrect. They listed it as $750 above what I'm paying now. So I'm hoping they're not going to use that incorrect rate to set the 25% increase. So please double-check that list and not necessarily take everything they provide to you. And I'm here to tell you that there are no electrical outlets anywhere on in the complex. The condition of our unit has not, similar to everyone else, has not been renovated or upgraded in 13 years. Drywall is coming off our window ledges. There's mold. And there's no regular maintenance person around. Unless it's trash day, the trash is just all over the place in where the garbage bins are. There's no regular maintenance of that. And another, I think, another thing on what they said that they have done is that they've informed new tenants that they are going to convert to condos. I've spoken to newer tenants, and that's not true at all. They have not been told that they're going to be converting to condos. And that's really I know that Commissioner Clifford and Commissioner Behringer have brought this up. Are they a condo, or are they going to be apartments? Because they don't have any plans of selling any units, and they haven't marketed anything, and they haven't sold anything. So they can't have their cake and eat it too. If it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, it's an apartment complex. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tolibas. Mr. Cerrone, followed by Bruce Sudredden.
Hello, Commission. My name is Edgardo Cerrone, and I've had the great pleasure of living here in Pacifica, growing up here. I went to Ingrid B. Lacey, before that Sunset Ridge, and I graduated from Terra Nova High School. I know every street in this town. I know all the people. And now I go to Skyline College, which is just 3 miles away from where I live in this apartment complex. And an increase in rent would be devastating to my family. I would have to take less classes, work more, as well as my sister. There would be less money for necessities, as our luxuries are already tight. And you know, hearing these stats of the rent and the market, it's ridiculous, you know, hearing that we've had a break for many years. You know, you guys are talking, people are talking about our lives as if, you know, we're just a statistic, just a number, right? And there's a lot of factors that go into a home, into a family. And I'm trying to better myself, get a education, hopefully transfer to UC Berkeley. I shouldn't be dealing with these outside factors, right, of somebody proposing a 25% rent increase on, you know, an apartment complex that houses over 138 apartments that are under market value. There would, if the rent was increased by 25%, would not mean market value. So that just speaks to what a oasis this is, right? And I almost feel like I'm being stripped of it. If this rent was increased, I would be forced to move somewhere in the East Bay, which is the only place that is almost next to affordable. And it's all looks to me as corporate greed. You know, there's a lot of things that have not been done, and there's a lot of he said, she said. Ultimately, there's you know, what seems to me is a ridiculous request and an attack on the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cerrone. Mr. Sudredden, followed by Sarah Sudredden.
Hi. I have been living in this apartment complex for the past 3 years. From the beginning, I realized how random was the apartment. We moved from Oregon for a job, and the move was so fast, I didn't have much of chance. I didn't even walk through my apartment. The last manager requested cash to move in. So we did cash, moved in, we didn't even see the apartment. I came in, my oven was broken, the bathtub wasn't ready, the dishwasher didn't work. And he told me, oh, we're gonna fix it, give us 2 weeks. So I said, where do I live? we got a hotel for 2 weeks. So they fixed what they paid. We paid for 2 weeks sooner to come in. We paid them to move in. Minus that, for the past 3 years, they've been through 3 managers. With all due respect, she is very new, and to me, she is here as an investigator. She's realizing how random this apartment complex is. So she's getting it back to the owners. I don't know how many they are. It seems like they're not communicating, and they're not ready even to turn this apartment complex to the condominium because they realize maybe the rent is a better, sweeter deal. And she's telling them, okay, it's bad, and they need a lot of money. So what they want to do, they want to fix it using our money, the rent increase, to later on sell it and kick us all out. That's the main reason. That's where they're standing. And it's not fair. My kid's going to a school here, my son going to the college. We came to this neighborhood happily, and I'm proud to hear the city of Pacifica is looking into rent control. I was very happy. It's just unfair. And it's funny when the owner is talking about the 3% per year. Yes, those are for the luxury apartment who's taking care of the things. Yes, they get, the apartments are luxury, they have the 3% increase. They haven't done anything here. You cannot even, I'm sorry if you give me 1 minute. You cannot even have your dresser by the wall or you're gonna have mold. Our oven, my wife puts the food on it for 1 hour, she thinks it's cooking, she's taking care of other stuff, come back, it's not working. You have to go jiggle it, so it works. Our laundry room last week was flooded. All they did was painted the wall. First of all, for 2 weeks we had no laundry room, because then when we opened it, we were all surprised. Oh, wow, yes, we have a new posters and paint. The laundries are 50 years old. They don't do anything, they don't wash. You put your money in it, you wash it, it's like you just got them wet. So you're happy it was washing. The gutters, the water is all over. I don't know what kind of water improvement they're talking about taking care of. Anytime it rains, we have flood in front of our stairway. Mold is inside the kitchen cabinet. So please, if any of you guys willing to come and see, don't get fooled by the one they fixed. Come to the one it hasn't been fixed for 20, 30 years.
Thank you, Mr. Sedredrin. Sarah Sedredin, followed by Bridget Duffy.
Hello. So we've been living in this apartment for 3 years, as my dad said before me, and there's so many problems with it. When we wash our dishes, the dishes don't get washed, and we have to wash them and clean them by hand before we put them in the dishwasher so that they can get cleaned somehow. As many people before me said, the laundry rooms have not been fixed. We put our clothes in the washers and they do not get washed. We put our money in the drying machines and we put our clothes in there. We come back when it says they should be done on high heat and they won't be dry when we take them out. They will be wet, not damp, they'll be wet. They put a little sticker when you call them to say to fix one of the machines, and it says something along the lines of, oh, this machine has been fixed, with a little smiley face. It hasn't been fixed. It doesn't work at all. We have to wake up in the mornings, and sometimes I walk into the bathroom and there is animals, like little bugs, little spiders that somehow get in through the walls, or I don't know where they come from, through little cracks that come from under our doors. There's drafts that come into our house, and nothing has been fixed whatsoever. Our appliances are all old. And sometimes we turn on our water at least a couple times a month. Our water will be brown. It will run brown when we turn on our water. And every time PG&E comes and tries to fix it, it lets out little pieces of black stuff, little chunks of things come out of our water pipes. It's absolutely disgusting, and we shouldn't have our rent be increased so that our apartments are livable. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sedredden. Bridget Duffy, followed by Tyson Redenbarger.
Hi, I just stumbled in here tonight and so happy to find a rent control issue. No, I'm only kidding. It's weird. I'm trying to understand why they're coming before the Planning Commission and asking for a rent increase. I know that there's been lots and lots of apartment buildings that have increased the rent more than 25%. So of course, there's always two sides to every story. You know, we hear both sides of the story, and really, to be honest with you, there is two sides to the story. But there's remedies to some of the problems. You know, we can be remedying the cost of owning a big apartment building with all of its Pacifican problems like mold in different ways that lower the costs. If we were smart about it, you know, and that's what I'm encouraging. But please, I just ask as a citizen, don't approve a rent increase at this point. The working class community of Pacifica has been being mass eviction, has experienced a mass eviction. There's been an opening at the Safeway in the deli department for 3 spots for over 8 months. Teachers at Terra Nova High School, there's been a 35% turnover directly related to the rent problem we're experiencing. So, you know, to me, any responsible person working in government in Pacifica today has to be aware of these things. And, you know, we need something to happen. We need both parties to be sated. But the tenants are the most vulnerable of those parties, obviously. I don't know why they have to ask you for the rent increase, but I'd like to find that out.
Thank you, Ms. Duffy. Tyson Redenbarger, that's the last card I have. If anybody else is interested in speaking, please do fill out a card.
Good evening. My name is Tyson Redenbarger. I'm a tenant, and I represent some of the tenants at the property. And I was involved in some of the lawsuit and the ongoing lawsuit that is currently happening. And I'm just going to make a couple points because there were a lot of comments earlier. At this point, the building is not a condo. It's an apartment. And in Pacifica, there is a moratorium on rent increases for apartments. And so it would be improper at this point to even raise the rent on this building since it is subject to that and it is not a condo. One of the board members mentioned earlier that he asked whether, Mr. Cooper, I believe you asked whether the owners would be willing to give moving expenses to people who were displaced by the raised rent. There was a letter submitted by another attorney on behalf of the owners indicating that they would not. So I would ask you to look at that letter. 138 tenants are eligible to be have their rent increased, and many of them will be increased 25%. That will likely result in displacement. The Pacifica Municipal Code, one of the purposes of the condo conversion code is to prevent that exact type of displacement, so I would request that you consider that foremost. As many of the people here have mentioned, the conditions are not up to standard, and I'm sure, Mr. Clifford, many of them would be happy to show you the conditions that they're complaining of. The BMR scheme that the owners have come up with is not workable. If a tenant lives in what has been designated a BMR unit, they potentially have to move from that unit, including completely away from the property if there isn't another unit available. The procedure just isn't workable whatsoever. Many of the tenants here were anticipating that they at one point may be able to buy a property. However, now if their rent is increased, their ability to actually buy that property that they were promised is it's hurt, in fact. So if they're going to pay more rent while not being able to purchase a property that they've been waiting to buy over many years, would be a shame. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Redenbarger. Well, I don't have any more speaker cards, so I think I'm going to take that as the signal then that we'll close the public hearing and bring the matter back to the commission for...
Mr. Chair, did you want to allow the applicant to have a rebuttal?
Well, thank you for reminding me of that. Is the applicant here at this point? If so, and if there's anything that you'd like to say with response to, in response to anything that's been said, we're, of course, anxious to hear from you.
don't really want to disagree with anybody, but there were some statements made that were just not true. We do have maintenance staff, Philippe, I can't remember his last name right now, does maintenance for us. Naturally, I would not expect the tenants to be in favor of a 25% or market rent increase. But what I think we have to look at is that we have to have money to maintain the property. We've been below market for a substantial amount of time. So I would like you to consider that as well.
Thank you, sir. All right, and thank you for prompting from staff on that. We'll go ahead then and close the public hearing and bring the matter back to the commission. And the first slide I see is Commissioner Cooper's.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you for everybody coming and speaking tonight. I think it's important that your concerns are done in a public forum. Part of our job here from the Planning Commission really is to guide City Council on land use issues as well as zoning and ordinance issues. It's very unfortunate that we have an issue before us that deals with rent increase. That's more of a policy decision than it is a Planning Commission issue. The reason that we're up here is because of the ordinance. The ordinance says that that when reviewing an application for rent increases, the Planning Commission shall consider the following underneath this ordinance. And there are three elements that we should be considering as a Planning Commission, and that is the prevailing rents for similar units, the residential rent components of the Bay Area cost of living, and the condition of the unit in essence. Those are the three elements that we have up here. It's not whether or not there's a rent increase, it's how do we establish the rent increase. One thing that I do find unfortunate is the expectation that some of you had for wanting to purchase a unit after you were there as renters. That was an expectation maybe that was false, and that's very unfortunate. The other portion that I struggle with as a commissioner is all of the issues that the public brings up to the conditions of the unit and not having a rent increase for such a long period of time. And I'm perplexed on how you think things are going to get better without a rent increase. And so the Planning Commission doesn't serve that purpose. I mean, that's whole nother venue. I mean, I can't do much as a Planning Commissioner to make your lives in your apartment any better, but that's not my purview. That's not what the Planning Commission does. So my decision really is going to come down to looking at what's before us tonight. And what is before us tonight is taking these elements from the ordinance and looking how I apply those to the issues before us. I'm not here to argue over whether or not the conversion was a legal conversion. I mean, that's past us. I'm here to look at what is being asked of me, which is to say, there's a rent increase proposed, and I shall evaluate on these three criteria. That's my purview as a planning commissioner. So, again, I understand where you're coming from, and as a planning commissioner, it's difficult for me to listen to some of these conditions, but I'm not sure that this is the right venue for it. I'm happy to learn. I'm happy that you're expressing your frustrations in a public forum so you can get your information out there. But in my opinion, I will be looking at this provision that's in front of me tonight.
Thank you, Commissioner Cooper. Commissioner Clifford.
Well, on the matter of the conditions of the unit, I think it's 1/3 of what we have to look at. And I have heard several people say that they would be willing to let me look at their individual units, and I'm certainly willing to go do that. But obviously, I can't make a decision tonight and do that. So that's one part. I think that it's really important that we verify that the rents actually, the units being rented reflect the cost being asked for them. If they're not in good condition, then you shouldn't be paying market rate for them. And I also would like to look at the possibility of if not changing the actual rate of increase, which I am, I am sympathetic to a 25% bump in cost, a quick increase in cost. I would kind of like to see that spaced out over a little more time. And I'm actually, I'd also like to verify that 25% is applicable for the apartments that we're talking about. So I guess what I'm heading to is asking to continue this so that we can possibly put together a subcommittee, me and one other commissioner, to go look at the units and then report back to the commission on what we see there, and then moving on from there with the other issues.
Thank you, Commissioner Clifford. Let's see what Commissioner Behringer has to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my concerns are that I agree with Commissioner Cooper, where we are theoretically limited to 3 items that we're supposed to take into consideration for the purposes of making our decision tonight. However, I just can't get away from the fact that those items were included in a document that was drafted in clear consideration of a project moving forward at a reasonable process and a reasonable timing, none of which has happened. And so here we are, literally almost 10 years later, having to deal with that outcome. And I have some fairly strong opinions on the fact that, again, I agree with Commissioner Cooper. This is not our purview, and we should not be here doing this. And it's a function of a document that was drafted in consideration of certain things that have not happened. So to me, I look at that as an opportunity to sort of maybe reset how we go forward on this. We may or may not be able to do that. The city attorney may be going, "Oh my God, it's Behringer again." But I think that if we have an opportunity to take a look at it, because number one, I'm sure that study cost us a lot of money for you to have that performed, and the consultants that had to be utilized to do that. We're paying for that, and there's really no assurance that we won't be back in another year or two doing this again. So I think that, we need to look at the condition of the units, because we are clearly able to take that into consideration. I would be willing to do that with you, Commissioner Clifford. And I think also the owner or the applicant should come back to us with a proposal on how he intends to go forward. And I have some thoughts on that, but if we continue it, we can give both parties perhaps an opportunity to rethink their position.
Well, I think I'd like to say a few things. Frankly, the idea of a continuance probably makes some sense to me, but a couple of observations. One, it strikes me that what we have at this point are, by way of the filing of the subdivision map or whatever the map is called, actually legally existing condominiums, although I was interested by the comment from Mr. Redenbarger about whether or not these are actually apartments versus condominiums. I don't know if the city attorney is ultimately going to have anything more to say about that, with respect to sort of moratoria and things like that, and whether they actually apply in this case. Broadly speaking, my sense is that people who own property ought to be able to charge what the property is worth to folks who are occupying it. I do, however, the ordinance imposes upon us the obligation to consider some factors. That is actually our charge, whether we like it or not. That's actually what the ordinance code says, is we're supposed to do this, and we're supposed to consider these factors. And as I look at it, as I was articulating earlier, I've got some concerns about, applying these factors in this case, at least with respect to the proposal that's been brought to us. I'm not comfortable with the notion of this applying the residential rent component of the Bay Area Cost of Living Index, backward looking for 8 or 10 years or however long it is. I think it's a little bit under the circumstance, to the extent it lies with our jurisdiction and it lies on me. I don't think a 25% increase at any one time is fair to honor the expectations of people as they sit right now. Having said it, I think that the property owners, over a reasonable period of time, ought to be able to capture the value of the property. And so I think that's something I'd really want to get a sense of. And I'd really like to understand how the conditions of these units track up with the conditions of the units that were used to build market rents. Really, I feel like that's a piece that I need to know. Recognizing, again, as my fellow commissioner, Commissioner Cooper stated, you got to have money to pay for, a decent place to live. And nothing like what we're talking about to make things better is going to be free. So a lot of things going on here, a lot of concerns that need to be balanced, and I think we need to, frankly, do that work. And I'm wondering if not, sort of the notion of a subcommittee sounds like a good idea, or perhaps even a special meeting of the commission as a whole on site to take a look around. Maybe noticing a special meeting at a time when we could do that is another possibility. I'm happy to defer to a subcommittee, but frankly, maybe we would all benefit from laying eyeballs on it together, particularly to the extent that we want to discuss what we're seeing in real time. So that's something I might give to staff and the city attorney to think about. Commissioner Cooper, it looks like you had something else to say.
Yeah, I just had one more comment. If you look at the table that was provided to us, and I think it's in the packet, you're looking at about a 46% rent increase for some of the lower units to make up the difference between the market condition and what the current rates are. And if you were to take a third of that off, you're still looking at about 30% increase, and the landlord's asking for 25. So I don't think it's that unreasonable asking for that amount. And again, for people who are on a limited income, that certainly is a bold statement, and it's really what is affordable for the place that you're living. And there's other resources. It's unfortunate that we don't have more resources for the Pacifica Resource Center. I was a huge proponent of the facility in Odstad to development for teachers and for public staff. I think that needs to be affordable, and there's other ways to supplement that. From the Planning Commission standpoint, it's not with this board, and I think from our perspective, it's, well, what's reasonable in this case? And 25% to me, as much as it's unreasonable for people who are on a very limited income, looking at it overall, it's still very affordable compared to the other apartments that are out there. Again, I think we need more information on the condition of the units, and I think that's a great suggestion. But I think the expectations need to be reasonable as well.
So what's the thinking of the commission in terms of next steps? Are you thinking maybe we set this to a special meeting? Do we set it for another meeting with the notion that you'd have a subcommittee go out and take a look? I mean, there's obviously nothing to stop us going by on our own, is to the extent that we want to just take a look at the common areas, I suppose. Thoughts? Commissioner Clifford.
Well, in terms of a special meeting, I'm certainly not opposed to it, but I do have a question about flexibility, how quickly we can make that happen with all of the commissioners and the noticing requirements and that regards in terms of actually having a meeting other than here.
Right.
Basically, how does the meeting function? So that would have to be something staff would have to work out. And a subcommittee could go fairly quickly.
Sure.
And I did hear tenants being willing to allow people in, but I'm not certain that they want all 7 of us in their apartment.
Yeah, I'm not wedded to the concept. But in any event, yeah, that's fine if that was the direction Commissioner wanted to go.
Yeah, I think we at a bare minimum, we need to inspect the condition of the units, because that's one of the issues that we're supposed to undertake, technically. So I think we need to do that, and whether we go en masse or we go with 2 of us. And I think if some of the people in the audience would give their names and addresses to staff so that we could have that, and if you're willing to allow us to, briefly inspect your unit, I think that would be something we'd want to get out of the way right away. And then I think maybe we can take that information and apply it to the calculus of the weighted average for rents, because that was one of the comments or one of the things that popped in my mind when I was reviewing this, is I don't know that we're comparing, like units in this case, and I understand that's really difficult to do, but I think that would be helpful in terms of having an informed opinion on what the rent should be. Then we can argue about how we get to the rent.
Okay.
Right?
Surely. Commissioner Cooper.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I'm not necessarily sure that I individually need to see the units. I'd really like to have an impartial person, an inspector or somebody from the city that compares these. I mean, these are there all the time. He can kind of give you an idea of to say, hey, you know what? Yeah, this is out of 100. This is 70. This apartment's probably 80. I mean, that's probably his purview more than it's my purview. I mean, we all have opinions, and I don't think it's fair to get the opinion of a person who's just either disgruntled with their unit or a person who's really happy with their unit. I mean, let's get someone who can say, hey, this. And overall, I think this is probably an average of a 7 building or a 6 building, whatever it might be. I mean, that'd be my opinion, but.
And through the chair, that was precisely why we chose to contact the county's residential rent inspection program. And I think that the chair makes a really good point that we're just missing that little extra bit of information about how it compares to the other buildings on the survey.
So, I mean, I think I'd be happy with that report. I mean, rather than us individually going and seeing the units, to have someone that's a little more in tune with what is out there. I mean, I don't visit apartment buildings every day. That's not my job. So.
Well, it sounds like kind of the outlines of a motion then might be sort of this notion of continuing to a date to be determined or a date certain with some staff work in the interim with respect to whether or not there are some material portion of the apartments that were identified or used in the study that ultimately came up with the market rents. Are there some significant number of those that have similar kind of issues going on, so to speak, with the county housing department or the county environmental health department, I guess, rather, or not? So how that plays into the mix, and were there other things that you all thought would be appropriate to include by way of direction?
From the direction standpoint, I mean, I think that if we take the lower percentage increase as the base, just rather than the 3.5, take the 3%. I think it's whatever that lower figure that you had done, I think is probably, in my opinion, would be the better figure to use as just kind of a base model. And then from there, we can do the determination as far as the units and what they look like and go from there. So
that sounds good. And the thing I'm sorry, Commissioner Clifford.
Well, I wanted first to speak to Commissioner Cooper's question of expertise. I personally do have more than a little bit of expertise in maintenance of buildings. And if my understanding is correct, Commissioner Behringer is not only lives in a condo complex, but is also a member of their board. And would also have detailed knowledge of maintenance issues in that environment. I think the two of us together could come back with a non-partial, non-biased report on what was happening there.
Okay, well,
and you know what, if you wanted to have that corroborated by a third party, I would have no problem with that. One point that I think would be useful, I think we need to validate the rent roll, because I heard a comment that the rent that was on the chart was not the rent that they were paying. And I think we need to have that certified, and then I think they need to tell us that these are the actual rents, so that when we get to the point where we're applying the calculus to it, we know we're working with the real numbers.
Well, a couple thoughts occur to me with respect to whether or not we actually need to appoint a subcommittee. It strikes me that under the Brown Act, the two of you could go and do whatever you wanted to, without any particular formal action by this board. So, on the other hand, I'm perfectly happy supporting a motion to appoint the two of you as a subcommittee to do whatever investigating you think is warranted and bring back any information you think is warranted. I don't know if there are 4 votes for that, but I would certainly be in support of it. I would also be interested in seeing the the staff report for the continued item, talk a little bit about, again, I'm very interested in the kind of the concept of maybe staging over time or phasing in over time a rent increase, and whether or not that might be something possible even to discuss with the applicant, the possibility of staging this so it rolls out over some period of time so that people have a little bit more ability to adjust to a changing economic reality. Commissioner Clifford.
Yeah, I would support that approach also. With whatever rent increase we wind up with, I would like to see it rolled out over time versus an all-at-once hit.
So then, is there a motion that I think one would be in order if somebody feels like they can frame one? Otherwise, Commissioner Cooper, go ahead.
All right, I'll make a motion. I make a motion that we continue this item for what date would be a good date?
It would be, since we're canceling July 3rd, it'll be July 17th.
For July 17th, and appoint 2 commissioners from the Commissioner, maybe Commissioner Clifford. You okay with that? Berenger, you okay with that? To go do a study for us and report back to us, along with the report back from the housing on comparable units. And from there, we'll make a determination, hopefully, on July 17th.
Okay, great, thank you. That's a motion. Is there a second? Commissioner Clifford.
I would second that with the addition that we have a verified rent chart for the existing rents.
So that's a friendly amendment to your motion. Are you okay with that?
What, I'm sorry, what?
A verified rent roll, I guess, is it?
How
I
does
care
that,
because I think it's a waste of city funds.
is that a motion that the applicant return with a verified rent roll?
Yes.
Okay, well, it doesn't sound like that's consistent with the original, that's not consistent with the original motion. Is there a second to the original motion, which did not include the rent roll?
Yeah, I'll second that motion.
Excellent. So we've got a motion and we've got a second. So we'll go ahead and take a vote on that motion. Okay, well, that motion passed 4-0. Thank you, and thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is for a new public hearing, CDP, Coastal Development Permit, CDP 36416, filed by applicant Carissa Savant and owner CRP PSC, Seaside Pacifica owner LLC, for the renovation of an existing 93-unit mobile home park, commonly known as Pacific Skies Estates, located at 1300 Palmetto Avenue, APN assessors parcel number 009-291020. The recommended action is to continue this item, and it will be renoticed. Anything else that we need to deal with on this item?
No.
Okay. Yeah, does that require any action from us to continue it, or?
I would say you should continue it, although it's not to a date specific, so we'll
Okay, so motion, is there a motion to continue to a date
I'll
to be
make a
determined?
motion to continue that item.
Commissioner Cooper made the motion. Commissioner Clifford second, looks like. Is that right?
Yes.
All right, all in favor? Okay, so that's unanimously continued. That'll then take us to that'll take us into commission communications. Any commission communications? Let's see. Commissioner Clifford, did you have a?
No.
All my lights are on.
You didn't shut it off.
Okay, thank you. No commission communications. Staff communications.
Just a couple things really briefly. We did release the EIR for the Fassler condo projects. I believe you received a hard copy. There will be a community meeting later this month. And I also wanted to mention that we were just...
Is that a formal study session, or is that just a community meeting?
It's actually a community meeting intended for the city to receive comments on the EIR, and it's not a planning commission meeting.
Okay. So
So-
is that follow-up to that study session that we had a long time ago?
Was it on the Fassler project?
Yes.
Probably.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Now finally coming before you. And I understand, I met with a developer late last week about a potential project on Odstad to include roughly about 24, 26 attached single-family homes. And they had a community meeting tonight, I think from 6 to 8. At Terranova. So you may have seen something on social media or may have received a postcard. So I wanted to just let you know that that was happening, but it hasn't been, there's no application submitted. They're just starting to get some community input about a potential project in the future.
Okay, cool.
Great.
I have a question.
Please, go ahead.
Is that the workforce housing for the school, or?
No, it's the location of the former Odstad Assisted Living facility behind the shopping center.
Oh, okay, okay.
I guess to the south of the shopping center.
All right,
Yeah,
thank
it's
you.
a different location.
Great. Well, thanks so much, and thanks for all the work on the packet, a lot of meaty stuff today. So that takes us into adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Is that Commissioner Cooper?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Commissioner Clifford?
I'll second that.
All right, let's go ahead and vote. All right, we're unanimous in favor of adjourning. Thank you.